A pleasure to meet all at last. And today, it's December 1st. Wow. With decorations on the rise, snow coming down and whatnot, I'm here to remind you, I'm not finished yet. As a matter of fact, I've actually been able to hit up the theaters yet again. There's a lot of new movies that have come around. And one in particular that I was able to get across is the latest installment to the Hunger Games series. This is basically a prequel far before the events of the majority of others. This is basically known as the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So, being that this is the latest installment, some expectations were in the air, and not too many people I knew basically came around to watch this. A number of people who might have been fans of the books or fans of the other films that have come around since day one might not exactly know what they're entirely getting to. And so, I'm sure a lot of people will have had reviews of their own of this by now. But being that I'm one of those that takes a while to get this whole thing put together, not just from the fact that I've gone on ahead and saw the movie a couple weeks ago when it was basically out and about. But essentially speaking, in the time that I've gone ahead and seen it in theaters up until now, I feel like I've gotten all things composed just so I can give you a proper review in this series. And so, being that this will pretty much be the second to last time that I'll ever have an inclusion of newer films in this series, up until the next time I do another Talk About It related series, which I'm sure will be around at some point next spring. But a few more shows and then another new film. But first, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is essentially another part of the book series, which is now officially part of the film series due to its recent release. But some people are basically wondering what it's basically about. This actually is a prequel, as I've said. This takes place many years before President Snow basically became the ever so famous tyrannical leader. And basically speaking, this was when he was 18 years old, living in the capital, his finest life, and essentially being assigned to be a mentor to certain members of District 12. And as we know, the world of Hunger Games is basically leveled out in 12 different districts. The higher the district, the higher the class, the person. District 12 is seen as the lowest end, basically. Probably the equivalent of that of, let's say, New York City or San Francisco. Whereas with District 1, or of course the capital, it would basically be with some cities out there that are much higher in terms of wealth, class, and etc. Basically, as we know, Corey Snow, long before he became president, lived in the capital alongside Tigress. And the thing is, I feel like that Tom Blyth probably does a good job as the character himself, but maybe he probably could have been given a better role, one might ask. Anyways though, that probably doesn't matter all too much though, because alongside his friend Plinth as well as other members of the capital, it came around to reason that they would actually be assigned certain tributes. These tributes in question actually originate from certain districts all over the world. And District 12 was the prime focus. Basically, it's high class versus low class being merged together into one uniform team. A team that supposedly would become the next target for the upcoming Hunger Games events. And after some stuff goes down, it gets to the point where eventually a girl known by the name of Lucy Gray Byard, a person who sings in District 12, practically gets singled out. But the fact is, Snow is the person assigned to work with Lucy Gray. This is basically one of those cases where you got one special person from a certain district working with another special person of another district. And well, It's basically the combination of these specialties that come from both of these districts. The pièce de résistance of either district. And to that I feel it seemed a bit obvious. One might have probably expected a specialty to be together with a more typical ed, but no, they gotta mix the two together. And I feel like though that it actually could have worked rather effectively. But the fact is that it gets to more than just a simple meet and greet session between the likes of Snow and Byard. The thing is, Lucy Gray and him basically take a bit of a liking to each other. Their words seem like the kind you might speak to your loved ones. It's almost like they were meant to be attached to each other in a certain way. But we, of course, cannot forget the one moment in the film where Snow is basically told by a lot of his peers, including Peter Dinklage, the tributes are not to be trusted. Even if they seem like they could be really friendly, they can basically overthrow you, no matter how well you think they might be. Snow has yet to realize this, and after some time passes, both the tributes and mentors eventually come together to the point where the arena is basically set in stone. The events are about to begin, and then of course, a bombing takes place. Thankfully, everybody manages to get out alive, but a few not so lucky individuals are sent to the local infirmary within the capital itself. And so it stands to reason that a number of things could potentially go wrong with this whole thing. And the so-called rebels that were responsible for the bombings to begin with, they themselves were practically under heavy restriction. And the peacemaker officers that were situated close by, who tried to get everybody out as soon as they could, it was quite unfortunate that despite the many efforts, the fact that Lucy Gray and Snow managed to get out, that also was quite a way to go. The events basically go as planned, however, despite these problems. But hey, I haven't even gotten to the best part of the whole thing. The game itself basically is what you might call the ultimate peace of mind when it comes to all the films. And in this particular case, unlike with the other films that we've seen so far, out of all the ones that the Hunger Games has had to offer, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes basically is like this. Lucy Gray ends up becoming an edge towards victory, whereas many of the other tributes that are in mind from District 12 and otherwise, they basically single each other out, exploiting weaknesses, grabbing weapons, and attempting to disable the other people within. Of course, Lucy Gray managed to get in alongside with a friend of hers. They managed to find a secret spot underground thanks to some advice that Snow basically described to her. And they managed to camp out down there for quite a while. I mean, who would have thought? It seemed like the most obvious way to victory. But unfortunately, this only goes so well. And the thing is, it turns out her friend had a form of rabies. It got so bad that eventually water had to be brought in from a drone nearby, and while it crashed into him, the water got all over, and he was terrified of water because that's a common symptom of rabies victims. And while he does end up dying, she manages to carry on out, attempting to use a certain weakness, the water that is delivered straight to the tributes via drones. Because unfortunately, it's gotten too dangerous for them to hand it to them in person. So the capital relies on old military drones to do the job for them. After more time passes, even after dark, the whole thing keeps on going. But then, oh boy. You basically got a tribute that is basically known as living tuberculosis. She ends up drinking the water from a bottle close by and ends up dying. It turns out that another tribute, known as Reaper, essentially liked her. So upon seeing her dying, he gets enraged. He basically gets all the bodies together, pulls one of the large flags off the wall, covers them as if the whole place is now a morgue. I mean, it probably wouldn't have been the weirdest thing I might have noticed, but it really is nothing at all compared to the real cake that comes in minutes later. Viola Davis, who basically plays a head on the Capitol and who was basically responsible for managing her own businesses and is definitely the most interesting piece in the whole cast. I mean, the many interactions that she has with Snow as well as other characters in the film, including this one moment where she and Snow basically demonstrate this little thing with snakes. Apparently, Snow has been told about the fact whatever a snake finds that's a certain scent, they will recognize it, and the snakes will not cause any harm to the person associated with it. However, if it's a different scent that they're not familiar with, they might be a little more on the territorial side and therefore are keen to attack whomever it may be. Quite unfortunate that a victim of theirs happened to be another student that Snow was basically accompanied by at the time. Of course, I really gotta mention that Snow's friend Plinth, whom of course was played by Joan Rivera, in this film at the very least, I probably wouldn't see him as more of the friend character that he got. Now, while he might technically be known as a best friend to him, I feel like that the real big connection in this film is between Snow and Lucy Gray. So, anyways, though, the whole thing about this, though, is that Snow basically exploits another type of weakness. In addition to the water being used as a means to help Lucy Gray reach the top and ensure victory for them, he also manages to go find the tank full of snakes that, believe it or not, are going to be used to end the games once and for all. Supposedly, the death of a certain child of the president in the Capitol has caused a lot of anger and backlash. Supposedly, the rebellion that was going against them was way more than they would have figured, because apparently the bombings actually killed this poor guy. So, what was their solution to this? To end the Hunger Games by dropping the whole tank full of snakes in the arena. That's kind of weird. But you know what though? It really gets even more interesting from here. All the snakes basically gobble up anything in their path and destroy all that's within. And talk about a way to end all life within the immediate area that they're dropped from. However, there's quite a twist that it envelops. Lucy Gray begins to sing as the snakes begin to approach her, cover her, and then it gets to a point where she's unable to be killed by them. Supposedly the snakes won't kill her. And you know what? There's a reasoning for this. A napkin full of Lucy Gray's own scent was actually deposited into the tank shortly before it was lifted up. Snow not only managed to exploit the weakness of water, but also from the snakes. So that's technically what you kill 2 songbirds with 1 Snow. Yeah, kill 2 songbirds with 1 Snow. That ought to be the new version of that saying. Oh man. But it only gets better from here, trust me. They technically got victory, but Lucy Gray, all that happened, she got sent back to District 12, and Snow was caught cheating. You see, Peter Dinklage found out about the whole thing. Both the powder that was used to poison the water, as well as the napkin that was used for the snake barrel. Both of these weaknesses were clear exploitations, and technically were violations of the rules. And so, disciplinary action stated that he was apparently to serve as a peacemaker grunt. He would be assigned to District 8, but upon request would be sent to District 12 instead. And his friend Plinth actually joins in with him after he found out about what happened. So basically, both Snow and Plinth head off to District 12 to serve amongst the peacemaker military groups that were situated within. And after some time passes, it seemed that a lot of things got along better, especially knowing that Lucy Gray managed to come back in one piece. And even better, she was able to make her district very proud. Not only for surviving the whole thing, but all that implies. So, you'd think it would probably get a lot better from here, but oh man, it gets even crazier. First of all, Plinth and Snow have a little argument about something wrong that takes place. Supposedly, a woman blames a man, a different kind of man, for killing someone, whereas the man, she might have been his lover of some sort. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but she's going crazy. Her man's getting killed, pretty much. And she has no way of proving his true innocence. She had to be locked up. Plinth supposedly found out about the real ordeal that took place, leading to the man's conviction. And the fact is that he's practically innocent in the whole thing. Whereas the real killer, the real man responsible for these crimes, has yet to be caught. And so he intends to find a way to capture him and exploit the truth about the whole thing, to expose the conspiracy. But it basically fails. Snow had a recorder device set up and supposedly was able to get Plinth in trouble for it. Supposedly, it gets even more crazy though. Because Snow and Plinth go into a back room where an argument is made, shots are fired, people die in the rooms nearby. Everybody's made to supposedly forget about the entire incident. But Plinth gets caught and supposedly is the one blamed for the whole ordeal. Not just from the conspiracy relating to the killer or relating to other crimes that are taking place within District 12, but also the murders that happened. And Snow supposedly fired one shot in one direction, and then another shot gets fired. Supposedly, the only thing that was truly missing, the big piece of evidence about it, were the guns themselves. Yet Plinth still gets accused for the whole thing, sentenced to death by hanging, and there's no way to stop him. Snow really keeps his mouth shut in the whole thing, because he worries he might get the same kind of treatment as well. After some more time passes though, just to know the fact that Plinth was a big problem, that itself at least took care of itself. And you know, this is really where I feel like interest in this whole series seems to get lost. Some people just don't quite understand the sheer satire that these books have brought about, and the big story relation to both the drama and the horrors behind all these plots. You know, that's just something I feel some people might be lacking here. But what can you really say about it? It's not every day that we get to find a book adaptation and the whole thing about it is basically replicated straight from the book to the film. I mean, the only real major examples would probably include the likes of Ready Player One, The Martian, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and a couple others I feel like would be at the top of my head. But you know what? In terms of the Hunger Games, each of these films has had their own pros and cons to them. And I feel like that with this, some people might not like certain elements about this whole thing with District 12. And especially the whole point knowing that Snow not only was working with the peacemakers for cheating, but basically some other elements that are implied, like the conspiracy and whatnot. Because after all, Plinth did what Snow expected him to do, to accomplish whatever he wanted to do in life. And even if it meant having to get himself in trouble for the whole thing, that's basically what Snow did. He unintentionally allowed Plinth to get himself killed in the name of justice. Anyways, though, as a means to move on, Snow basically goes out to the lake in a cabin alongside Lucy Gray and some of her friends. They basically enjoy some quiet time together, and after that, this is where the most interesting portion of the whole thing comes into play. Snow basically makes a run for it one early morning in an attempt to hopefully get out of District 12. Along with Lucy Gray, they both manage to leave with some stuff packed. they would make a stop at the cabin nearby where Snow tries to get fishing gear out, but ends up finding the guns that were used in the murder spree that went down. The same murder spree that Plinth got killed for. So, if that already doesn't tie a lot of loose ends, oh man, in the next 5 to 10 minutes that pass, this is where it gets really impressive. In terms of laying out a big double twist, still not as impressive as that triple twist I managed to find in a couple of movies thus far. Yeah, it's extremely rare right now because only a few films have done it so well. Like The Bad Guys, for instance. Greatest animated film we've got. Yeah. Anyways, though, apart from the fact that the guns were exposed in that cabin, there was also the part where Lucy Gray supposedly ends up going missing. Despite Snow's best efforts, he just can't seem to find her. And even more so, he actually finds a dead body on the ground. A dead body that supposedly relates to the fact Lucy Gray might as well just be considered the whole meaning of untrustworthiness. Distrust, deception, by all accounts. Supposedly they had a thing going on together, but the two basically never quite knew each other fully. And that's basically where the whole thing just drops a ball. The whole romance thing going on within the film just completely throws itself out the window with no way of stopping it. And the fact is, it just goes to show, it's much like how it was said before in the film. You just can't trust any of the tributes because they can always do a lot of things that others may not know about until it's too late. And in this particular instance, this is one big moment. Snow finally has full realization of the whole problem in hand. Lucy Gray might have been the whole reason for this. He got himself in trouble because he went out of his way to help her. He got Plinth killed because Lucy Gray might have pulled a few strings here and there. And on top of all that, she does not come out to face anything relative to justice. So despite all that's gone down, Snow no longer has the tendency to want to be with her any longer. After all the time passes to where he is eventually cleared up of any problems and manages to get all things relating to the Peacekeeper grunts done with, he basically gets back to the capital safe and sound and right in the hands of Dinklage. At the end of the film, this is basically where we see the turnabout to where Snow truly becomes the tyrannical president of the land itself. And we certainly can't forget the fact that after all that's gone down, this surely is quite a way to create an origin story. A man hated anybody of the land because he was truly deceived by one person who he thought he loved very much. All the way from District 12, a place that has been regarded as having a lot of hate and a lot of disparity and a ton of incorrigibility from within. So we can definitely see how Snow attained his presidency, and moreover, how he became that rather infamous leader with a big grudge on all the people from the districts. And more importantly, how did the other films truly unfold? It's basically gotten to the point now where we have a full circle learning all the prospects and all of the washouts that have come and gone across all known events in the timeline. So you know what though? I feel like that with all things considered, the cast, the scenery, the work on both the action and adventure elements, as well as some horror drama, I feel like that they really made sure that this was one for the ages. And while I can't call it a masterpiece, I feel like it was at least necessary to bring this whole thing close together. And to have an origin of how President Snow got to his point in life, this was certainly quite a worthwhile tale. Despite how long it was, I feel like they made everything worthwhile. Probably better than how the duration of 2005's King Kong came to be. With a lot of filler and fad, contrast to what we got with the time itself, the duration, which is in excess of 140 minutes, I feel like that the Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes will deliver its own KFN official ranking by me to be a good 7.9 out of 10.1. And so, whether you want to apply this ranking to your own personal liking or whatnot, if you have your own rating, then please, do be sure to have it in your own possible way. But the way I see it, this truly felt like a prequel that was indeed necessary to give us all the elements that we were looking for to tie everything together within the Hunger Games timeline so far. And if there's any more books, any more films that we could piece together just so we can expand the world of the Hunger Games any larger, then please, put it all together. I'm sure that a lot of people would want to see other book adaptations done as well, assuming if that could even be done. So, anyways though, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side if you'd like to see more.